We're going to talk defense with Josh Helmer of KREF coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Josh, the defensive side of the ball has been trending in a really positive direction. I know when we talked, when you were still part of the show, we were talking about the Clemson trend that we saw out of Brent Venables' defenses. Do you think from a big picture perspective, we're heading towards that top 10 finish in defensive efficiency?
You just might be on the precipice of that, just based on that timeline that we spent so many, shows and nights and weeks talking about that. Hey, the statistics tell you that Brent Venables, the defense, it just, boom, it just goes on that, incline up, and it's rapid. And the biggest reason, obviously, for that is what I probably both of you guys, and I'm sure many folks out there are saying, the defensive line guys has a chance to be one of the best in the SEC. It has a chance to be one of the best nationally. I love the interior of this Sooner defensive line. I love what obviously you got from Jayden Jackson a season ago, but it's larger than that. It's all of those names inside. Dominic Williams has been tremendous. Halton's been obviously a player in recent years for Oklahoma. David Stone. Now you're waiting for that big. You're waiting for the big jump for David Stone. Hopefully he can give that. Maybe some of these other youngsters for Oklahoma. Nigel Smith's kind of an interesting name that was on the outside, and now he's inside for OU. So you start thinking about, like what Halton did and what Jayden Jackson has done. Oklahoma, just with this coaching staff, they've got one of the best defensive tackle coaches in America. So I think you start there. You obviously focus on R. Mason Thomas outside. Mm-hmm. The defensive line for Oklahoma, guys, is legitimate. And I love what they've got at linebacker. It's not just Kip Lewis and a couple of the stardom plays that we saw a season ago. I think that they've cultivated a deep group there, and we'll see about corner, right? I mean, that might be kind of the biggest question mark you'd point to. Some would say the edge position opposite R. Mason Thomas, though you hear good things about Taylor Wine and others throughout this camp. We're all waiting for PJ to take that 5-star leap, and maybe that happens this season. I certainly hope it does, but the defense, man, I think it could be primed for that. It will hinge upon how well those corners develop and can they keep those guys healthy. And if they do, then I think Oklahoma under Brent Venables, they're going to have one of the best defenses in the SEC. And I'm glad. Count me in the camp that I'm happy that Brent Venables is the one pushing the ones and twos for Oklahoma defensively. I just think when that's your bread and butter, let that be your bread and butter. And I think that can only pay dividends for Oklahoma.
And that was the one thing I said about Brent Venables being here and why I'm still an advocate of him right now is that if his defense was terrible, yes, fire that man. Because he's here for that specifically. That's why he assembled his staff around him specifically, was to have a good defense. And they're providing that. And so, as you pointed that out, it's on that similar Clemson trajectory. I was looking at some of the numbers. A friend of mine put together the stats. And when Brent Venables got to his third year at Clemson, he had the number 1 ESPN defense efficiency, number 6 in SP+, number 1 in DFEI, number 1 in D-score, number 3 in DSRS, which are all efficiency ratings, right? The next season, it went to number 2, 21st in SP+, 7 in FEI, D-score, etc. But then the year after that, it went right back up. So you could see where the ebbs and flows was of him building the right players and getting the right players on the roster. I've talked about this a few times here on the show too, is that you can tell this staff likes the players that they recruit because majority of the players, especially on defense, are guys that they got as high school players. And so I know that there's so many concerns about the way the recruiting is going, but you can tell they're going after specific players to play specific roles in specific times on this team, and it's starting to pay those dividends. We're seeing an actually good defense. That is the thing that warms me up. But Josh, I have to ask you, Brent Venables is going back to calling plays, and there's a lot of people that have concerns, but this is not an uncommon thing. How do you feel about him calling plays here this coming season?
I'm excited about it. I think do what you are best at. Nobody really had, for the most part, a problem with Lincoln Riley calling offensive plays at Oklahoma. I think it's for some reason, and I don't even know that this is really the case in the NFL, though admittedly, let's just call it what it is with Brent Venables, right? At times, the game management's not been good enough. And so, for Sooner fans, if you haven't been great in the game management department, which at times Brent Venables in Oklahoma have made some questionable game management decisions across his 3 years so far, and then all of a sudden you're, in some fans' minds, taking that head coach CEO hat off to go call the defense, I understand why that alarms some folks. But it does feel like to me, especially in college football, and maybe it's this way, Jay, in the NFL too, we have a different standard for coaches that want to call defense versus offensive-minded head coaches that want to play call offense. Nobody ever really cares that Andy Reid is dialing up the plays for Kansas City. As a matter of fact, they use it to take away from his offensive coordinators. They say, well, was Bieniemy actually calling the plays? So it's like we don't have that problem with offensive-minded head coaches, but for some reason – in particular, it seems in college football we do with defensive-minded head coaches, or at least that's what I've been exposed to, what we've been exposed to here at Oklahoma. And I don't know why that's the case. So my thought would be if Brent Venables came in as one of the best defensive minds in America, and he obviously did, then I'm good with him calling defensive plays. I don't see why you can't manage all of it and still be a great defensive play caller. To me, there's no reason you can't have somebody on staff that calls timeouts, that tells you to do X, Y, Z in game. So that would just be, I don't know, organizationally how Oklahoma goes about putting those right puzzle pieces in place. But to me, it would seem that why can't you do that? Why can't you have somebody that's in your ear helping you if you need some big picture help at times while still calling defensive plays? I want him calling defensive plays because he's one of the best defensive play callers in college football.
Exactly. And that's why you bring in a guy like a Kevin Wilson to be one of your analysts on the staff, or why you hire defensive guys with defensive coordinator experience. You have an experienced offensive coordinator in Ben Arbuckle. You can pretty much let him run the show. You kind of just got to be aware of what's going on offensively, situationally. Do we go for it on fourth down? Are we trying to go hurry up in this moment? Do we want to slow things down right now? Like, that's kind of the bigger picture thing, but I think that's a collaborative approach that they're going to take. And like you said, man, Brent Venables is one of the best in the game for the last 25 years. So I'm willing to deal with some of the game management questions if it means I've got the best defensive coordinator or one of the best in college football calling my defense, because that's only a plus. We're going to talk best case, worst case scenarios with Josh Helmer of KREF and the Dari Noka Show coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.